Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz vocalist, composer, and arranger Gabriela Martina on the 2024 CD called States. This new album includes compositions that she had been working on during the time of the pandemic between 2020 and 2021. The word States has more than one meaning. State comes from the Latin status meaning condition of country. The word States mostly gets associated with the United States of America. In what state of mind are the states currently finding themselves in? On this record, she explored wordplay, political tension, different states of mind in order to express her findings through sound. We cover some solid ground in this interview. Enjoy. It's great to catch up with you again. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your interest.
Absolutely. So I want to begin before we get into your latest album, States. I want to know, now that we've officially kind of gone through and gotten out of this pandemic time, how's everything going? Now that we have a minute to be reflective and look back on what happened, how does it feel to kind of have new material and to kind of be out of this pandemic world that was affecting artists in such a strange way?
Well, I mean, my entire circumstances may be a little bit different to other musicians because I also moved. So I had to start kind of like from zero again in Europe, and I'm still starting. So it's not been great, I have to say, because it's, you have to kind of find venues, you have to find musicians, you have to make a lot of effort, learning a new language, etc. So for me, it's not been yet going great, but I think it's a matter of time. But I do know from other musicians, even though they have the network, they lived in the country, they always have and didn't have a move or anything, that it's still not quite back to whatever normal means. I was just at Jazz Ahead, the conference in Bremen, and you hear that from, promoters, you hear it from festival organizers, you hear it from venues. It's just everywhere still. It's tough. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but I can also not lie and say everything is great. It is tough, but I think it's not just a pandemic issue or after pandemic. It's also just in general the entire change of modern technology and the pace with how the music industry is developing right now with AI, etc. So there's just a lot that kind of plays a role here.
So in your liners and in your PR, you talk about this was kind of something you've been working on during the pandemic. Talk to me about States. Talk to me about ultimately the creative forces that went into making this final product.
Yeah, it feels funny, but it's kind of, for me, it's already like a while back when I wrote this album. So which was, 2020, 21, when I was doing my master's at NEC and the pandemic hit. And it's a very, very different album from my Homage to Gremlis, which, involves some yodeling, etc. And is about my childhood. So States is really about the time during the pandemic, which was, a lot of people were isolated. There was a lot of political unrest, not just in the States, but that's where I experienced it most because I was there that time. And it was, it was not a pleasant feeling, obviously for lots of people. And I think a lot comes out in those compositions. You feel the hectic kind of, like feeling of distraction, of frustration, of anger, of not knowing what comes after. Is there an after? All these questions, political unrest, lots of demonstrations, people, trying to figure out a way forward together or not. I think that comes out in a lot of the songs. I can go into details of each one of the compositions, but we'll see what your next question is about that. So.
Well, yeah, no, and I think that's the thing that is interesting about this time that we're living through right now is that there is so much going on, with, in politics and with global conflict and all of these things. So my question is, you know, this is kind of a response to all of that that's going on. But in general, I think art and music tends to heal people. Do you feel like there's a level of, I don't want to use the word responsibility, that can get heavy, but do you feel like there's some like maybe moral obligation to a certain degree that artists have to kind of be a part of the healing and getting things out there to address what we're living on this planet?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's really up to every artist as an individual what they want to express. But I think it's kind of impossible not to reflect anything from the time that we're currently in at any point, because it's just there's always so much happening, and I think it probably just naturally happens to so many artists, be it in, whatever discipline, doing art, sculptures, painting, dance, music, whatever. And of course, not everybody does that. And I wouldn't say it's a responsibility. I have a little hard time actually with that, especially if you're a freelance and you are kind of dependent on grants, to just be able to tour, to be able to release an album, etc., which costs tons of money. And all these grant foundations, organizations, many of them almost ask you for, is your project in any way contributing something to society, or is it, helping others, etc., etc. And if you don't have that in there as part of it, you actually don't get the support. So I find that a little bit crossing a line of, if it doesn't come naturally to the artist, and if that's always kind of like in their guidelines, I find that sad, because it still should be something that is, that the artist or just people in general would like to contribute to. If it's not enough to just make sound, that's great. That's actually helping people anyway, because it's just great sound. And that's not enough. I find that sad that it has to always have a mission. So I'm a little bit in a conflict with that, I have to be honest.
I get it. I totally get it. So at the end of the day, I'm curious, what are you hoping the listener gets from this project?
I think I am happy to hear if it moves people. I'm happy to hear if it starts conversation. And that they feel like if they're coming to a live concert, which I still think is much, much nicer than just listening to the record, that they really get this other layer that you and me now cannot get via an audio call or a Zoom call. It's just that other dimension, I call it, whatever it is, that it's really hard to describe, but that happens only if people are in the same room. And you can, as a musician, and that's kind of, I think, our big credit to have for live music, still touch people differently if you're in the same room. And there's just something every performing musician and artist, whatever they do, can say that, because that's why we're still doing what we're doing. And it's just you touch something deep that they will carry with them. It's kind of like giving a gift. It's giving a story from you, from your heart, from your soul, whatever you want to call it, that they can take home and they can tell others about it. And they say, hey, this is really something that made me think about my own story, or I've never thought of that. Like, what do you think? And that it actually starts a conversation, and it's kind of like an ignition point of a feeling, a sensation that makes them think, that touches them. Yeah.
So speaking of that very visceral live experience, what are you doing as far as live shows promoting? The warm months are upon us. What's going on with you in promoting this album?
Oh, well, I have a tour coming up in actually a few days. The first concert is on the 23rd of May. And it's in Switzerland with, 6 concerts in Switzerland, and one is in Austria, in Vienna. on the 29th of May. And so I'm very busy right now with just, tour planning, because I'm doing everything myself, getting the musicians over here and, feeding them and accommodating them and transporting them around. So, I hope that the venues are as good as sold out as possible and that the people enjoy themselves. And obviously the record will be for sale on my website once it's released on the 23rd of May. And it will be eventually, I assume, on Spotify, because it's something you can't really go around these days, even though I find it still very, I'm not a fan of Spotify in that sense, because it doesn't really pay the artist. That's another story. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, like getting more gigs and hopefully another tour in maybe the fall or in 2025 in the States.
So speaking of Spotify and all these other streaming services that don't give the artist what they're deserving, I'm curious, where's the best place for people to pick up a physical copy, the best way that people can get this album to support you and to find out about live shows, anything else that's going on in your world?
That is my website, GabrielaMartina.com, and Gabriela is spelled with one L.
Gabriela, it's been so great to catch up with you again. Thank you so much for taking a minute out. Best of luck with the album and everything else as it comes forward. I know it's always kind of strange when we talk because you've moved on to the next project. So hopefully it's good to kind of revisit the project as you look forward to the next one. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Amsterdam, Switzerland, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Gabriela for coming on back to Neon Jazz. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends. Hey Jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are quite excited to let you know about the first annual Lee Summit Jazz Fest taking place this summer on June 22nd, 2024 at the Bridge Space located at 210 Southwest Market Street. There will be 8 robust acts, including the Back Alley Brass Band and the great Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be art vendors and food trucks to make this a must-attend event. All details can be found at www.bridgespace.us/jazz. We will see you there.
Neon Jazz.